The desert stretched endlessly beneath the burning sun, a vast ocean of golden sand and red stone cliffs, the air thick with heat shimmering above the earth as if the world itself was breathing fire. And he rode through it, sweat running down his brow and dripping onto his chest, his shirt torn open from the long ride and the skirmish earlier that morning, every muscle aching yet alive with adrenaline. And when he reached the abandoned outpost where she had been hiding, he thought at first that he had found a mirage, for there she was, dark hair wild from the wind, eyes gleaming like midnight pools that could swallow a man whole, her face both fierce and soft, a contradiction that made his heart stumble in his chest. And when he dismounted she stepped closer, her presence bold yet delicate, as if every inch of her was both a weapon and a bomb. And he couldn't breathe as she whispered his name, testing it on her tongue like a secret she had longed to say. And then she reached up, not with hesitation but with a fiery courage that both startled and weakened him, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, her eyes burning into his soul. And when she leaned closer, the desert fell silent, the wind stilled, the earth held its breath, for in that moment she was more than a woman. She was temptation itself, the storm he had feared and the shelter he had craved. And as her lips brushed his skin, tasting the salt of his sweat, he groaned low, not from pain but from the unbearable sweetness of surrender, a sound that betrayed how hard he had fought against the fire that now consumed him. And though every instinct told him this was dangerous, that he was losing control, that once he stepped into her warmth there would be no turning back, he found himself powerless, his hands trembling as they hovered at her waist, the desert sun still beating down on them yet paling in comparison to the heat between their hearts. And he thought then, with a dizzying clarity, that this woman, this moment, this feeling was not just desire but destiny. And as his breath mingled with hers he realized he was standing at the edge of a precipice where love and ruin were the same path, and one step more would send him tumbling into a place from which he would never return. And yet, he wanted nothing more than to fall. The night had fallen heavy over the desert, the stars burning bright and endless above them as if the heavens themselves were watching with 1,000 unblinking eyes, and the air, though cooler than the day, still carried the memory of the sun's fire, pressing close against their skin. And he sat by the flickering flames of a small fire, shoulders tense, staring into the orange glow as if answers might rise from the embers. But every time he closed his eyes he saw her face, the fierce softness of it, the way she had looked at him not as an enemy, not as a stranger, but as something far more dangerous, as a man she could unravel with a glance. And when she stepped from the shadows of the ruined outpost, her movements lit by moonlight, graceful and silent as a panther, his heart stuttered again like it had no right to, for she carried herself with the weight of both freedom and captivity, as though she belonged to no one yet somehow had already claimed him. And she came closer, kneeling by the fire, her eyes never leaving his, their silence louder than any gunshot, their unspoken words heavier than any vow. And she reached for his hand, her fingers warm, her touch steady, and in that simple act he felt himself fracture, torn between the life he had lived and the life she stirred within him, a life that could mean betrayal of his past but salvation of his soul. And as he drew her closer the world seemed to collapse into a single moment where nothing else mattered but the rhythm of their breathing, the fragile thread of trust weaving itself between them. And when she leaned her head against his chest he trembled not from weakness but from the unbearable truth that he had found in her something he had never known he needed, something so rare it frightened him more than any bullet or blade ever could. For it was not her beauty alone that undid him, nor the fire in her spirit, but the way she made him see himself, stripped of armor, stripped of pride, a man laid bare in the raw honesty of love he had never dared to imagine. And as the fire crackled, as the coyotes howled in the distance, as the desert night wrapped around them, he whispered her name like a prayer and she closed her eyes as though the sound of it was both a promise and a curse. And in that quiet he realized the truth, that he was no longer his own, that he had given himself away without meaning to, and that the road ahead would be lined with peril, betrayal, and battles both seen and unseen. Yet even knowing the cost, even sensing the danger, he could not let go, for to lose her now would be to lose himself. And so he held her tighter, his voice low and unsteady as he vowed silently to the night, to the stars, to the fire, and to his own trembling soul, that whatever came, whatever storm broke upon them, he would face it all so long as she was with him. For he had tasted the edge of paradise in her warmth and now there could be no return, only the burning, relentless journey forward into a love that might save him, or destroy them both.